What is up, viewer out there watching this video? Rocks back here, and the race for Lord Stanley's prized possession has been determined. The Stanley Cup Playoffs of 2016 are about to start, and I'm here trying to show you guys my predictions for who's going to take the crown home this year. Starting things off, we have the Dallas Stars versus the Minnesota Wild, the first matchup in the Central Division. And really, if I had to take account of this, I'd definitely say Dallas. Dallas has that offensive firepower. Minnesota has proved to be a good team heading into this season, but I, along with, I'm guessing many fans, expected at least 40 wins out of the Wild this year, especially coming off of that really long losing streak to end the season. We know that Vanek is out for one game with an injury, so that's going to impact the Wild as well. And really, it's not even that I'm against the Wild. For the past 2 years, I've wanted them to beat Chicago, but unfortunately, when it comes to this year, I think Dallas has the upper hand going into the playoffs, so Dallas will take this one 4-2 in my opinion. 6 games for Sagan, Benn, Spezza, Sharp to knock out the Minnesota Wild and advance to the second round. Now we move on to the Chicago Blackhawks versus the St. Louis Blues. Okay, now, many have been saying that St. Louis has really been building up. St. Louis is definitely one of those teams that you're scared to go off against in the regular season. They got themselves the Backes, the Tarasenko, the Steens, then the new guys like Colton Parayko, and Brian Elliott is playing out of his mind right now. So what's going to happen when they go up against Art Ross winning Patrick Kane? What about new free agent signing Artemi Panarin? Oh, Jonathan Toews too? Huh. Oh no. Duncan Keith is out for a little bit of the playoffs because of that really dumb thing he did against Charlie Coyle, but regardless, I think Chicago, I think they're going to control this series. I really do. When it comes to playoff performances, when you think of a playoff team, you think of either LA or Chicago. So when I look at the current St. Louis team, I don't sit there and think to myself, this is a team that can definitely beat the Blackhawks in a 7-game series. I think Chicago is going to take this one 4-2, maybe even 4-1, depends on how the Blues maintain themselves. Not saying that the Blues can't do anything though, they're going to put some damage on Corey Crawford, but the Chicago Blackhawks have just proven so much in the past, and I think that they can do it again. 4-2 for Chicago. Starting things off in the Pacific Division, we have the Anaheim Ducks versing off against the Nashville Predators. Now, the Predators are a team that have changed, you know. They have Shea Weber, they have Roman Josi, they're good defensively, they're good offensively too with Philip Forsberg, they got themselves James Neal, they've got a good top line, but really the big change here is that they have Ryan Johansson. And Ryan Johansson is really going to change up this Predators team offensively, and he's proved that he's done that in the past. But when they go up against a team like the Anaheim Ducks, who have started off the season as a bottom feeder team, I think that Anaheim has really grown into a team that shows that they can win, and shows that they absolutely want to win. Despite Anaheim's very bad start, I think that they have grown back into the team that they were last year in the playoffs. The team that lost to Chicago, the team that swept the Winnipeg Jets, and that's what I see when I look at this series. I look at Anaheim versus Nashville and I say to myself, Anaheim's going to win this one 4-1. Our next series is the LA Kings versus the San Jose Sharks. Now the Sharks, they have 3 70-point guys on their team, Brent Burns, Pavelski, and Thornton. And the Kings, well, they're the Kings. They weren't in the playoffs last year, but the last time the Kings and the Sharks did meet, well, we all know what happened there. The reverse sweep happened. We all know how good LA can be in the playoffs, and when I look at the Sharks, I do see the offensive talent they have, you know, Pavelski, Thornton, Brent Burns, but really the problem is on the back end. You look at their defensive core and you see Brent Burns, you see Marc-Edouard Vlasic, but who else do they have on that team? They got Roman Polak, they got Braun. Paul Martin is one of the best defensemen other than Vlasic and Burns. So when I look at this team, I look at their defensive core and I say, that team is not going to be able to hold back the likes of Anze Kopitar, Jeff Carter, Tyler Toffoli, etc. And even though that offense is good, there still is a Jonathan Quick on the other side. So when I look at the series, San Jose versus LA, I think to myself, LA is going to take this one 4-2. Starting things off in the East, we have ourselves the Washington Capitals versus the Philadelphia Flyers. Philadelphia getting 2 points in their last 2 games to beat out the Bruins and make the playoffs. Shane Gostisbehere is one of the candidates for the Calder Trophy, and it's well-deserved. Coming onto the team late, starting the season in the AHL, he's one of the best rookie defensemen. He's probably the best rookie defenseman, beating out Ben Hutton, Colton Parayko. He's definitely one of the best offensive defensemen in the league, dare I say it. But I think that the Philadelphia Flyers, they're heading into the right direction, but I think the time is not now. I think that Washington, with Ovechkin, Kuznetsov, Backstrom, TJ Oshie, Justin Williams, Chimera, then on D you have Alsner, Carlson, and in net you have Holtby, who got 40-plus wins this season. Washington's going to beat Philadelphia 4-1 in my opinion. And don't get me wrong, Philadelphia, I like the Flyers, kind of. I don't know if I should, but I like Gostisbehere, but I think the time for the Flyers isn't now. I know they have Voracek, I know they have Giroux, but when I look at the Washington Capitals, I think this team can definitely beat the Flyers in a 7-game series. So 4-1 Washington is what I predict. Next up, we have the Penguins and New York. Now, the Penguins, they don't have Fleury, they don't have Malkin, but they've still had a ton of success. Bonino having incredible chemistry with Hagelin and Kessel, and when Malkin comes back, some are saying that you can put Malkin on the third line because Bonino, Hagelin, Kessel is just that good. Matt Murray being called up, 21 years old, best goalie in the AHL, best rookie in the AHL, and he's been playing out of his mind for Pittsburgh. He's the reason why a lot of Penguins fans are saying, well, I honestly hope that I hope that Fleury doesn't come back for the postseason. And I think that that's a really good thing because it shows just how good Pittsburgh is when it comes to their depth. They have Sundqvist, they got Connor Sheary, they have Russ, they have all these guys who are good enough to play at the NHL level at a young age. And I think that's really good for the Penguins, especially going up against the New York Rangers. Now, everyone was expecting Nash to be one of the top point guys this year, like last year, but he didn't have St. Louis on his wing this year, which I think really diminished his chances of getting that, and it was proved to be right, as he wasn't that dangerous offensively as he was last year. But the New York Rangers still have a good team, but I don't think they have what it takes to beat out this current Penguins team that doesn't even have Malkin. I haven't even mentioned Crosby once. I think that the Penguins will take this one 4-2 over the New York Rangers. Next up, we have Florida versus the Islanders. Now, Florida, Ekblad, Luongo, and their young guns like Trocheck and Huberdeau and Barkov and Bjugstad. I think that Florida has what it takes to actually do something very, very damaging to these other teams that they play in the playoffs. And that's right, I said these other teams, because I think that Florida will take out the Islanders 4-3 in this series. Now, the Islanders, Jonathan Tavares isn't as good as he was last year, and when you look at the lines they have, Okposo, Tavares, Nielsen, Okposo might be gone next season, and I think that really does say a lot about what the Islanders have right now. When I take a look at the Islanders' lines, I don't think that they have what it takes to beat out a Panthers team who has just been really good. Luongo's in contention for the Hart. That's how good Luongo has been doing recently at such an old age. I can't not cheer for Bobby Lou, especially as a Canucks fan. I don't know if I have a bias or not, but I think Florida will definitely take this one 4-3. Our last matchup is interesting. Detroit versus Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay, no Steven Stamkos. That's a very, very, very big hit. And Stamkos very could well go to Detroit. Datsuk might leave, so the money could be freed up for Detroit. So, maybe there could be some room for Stamkos. But we're not talking about Stamkos. We're talking about the Detroit Red Wings versus the Lightning. And the Red Wings, Dylan Larkin, has been very good this season. The new young guy coming straight out of the University of Michigan really does change up this Detroit team and who they have. Really, when I look at this series originally, I think to myself, yeah, well, the Lightning can definitely take the Red Wings out. They've done it in the past. I think Tampa Bay is going to take this one, let's say 4-2, whatever. But Stamkos isn't there. So that's going to be a really, really detrimental part to the Lightning. And because of that, I'm going with Detroit for this one. 4-2 Detroit. Moving on to the first matchup of the second round, we have the Dallas Stars versus the Chicago Blackhawks. The two teams that everyone has been hyping up this playoffs go up against each other. This one is going to go to 7. I think that everybody knows that. And the fact that everyone does think that Dallas could beat Chicago is a big statement to how good the Dallas Stars are. They have the firepower. They have Seguin and Benn. I know Seguin has dropped off a little bit, but the Blackhawks do have their own power in Kane and Panarin as well. Not to even mention Taves, who is probably one of the best two-way guys in the league. So when I look at this matchup, I do think that Dallas will take this one. I think that Dallas, just for the sake of getting another team in there, because I don't want Chicago to win, and for the sake of, holy hell, Dallas could actually win this whole thing, I say the Dallas Stars in 7. Let's just say Game 7 is a 1-0 overtime win, scored by Jamie Benn. Let's just say that. Our next matchup is the Kings versus the Ducks, a rematch from 2014 where the Kings won in 7. This year, I think that the results will be reversed. Anaheim will take this one in 7, not because I think that the Kings have dropped off a little bit, but because I think the Ducks have just improved so much over the vast majority of this year. Look at the beginning of the season when they were bottom feeders. Look what they worked towards. First in power play, first in penalty kill. They've had a lot of success this season, and I think that that will carry on into the playoffs. So I'm going to say Anaheim 4-3 over the LA Kings. In the East, the first matchup, Ovechkin versus Crosby, the Washington Capitals versus the Pittsburgh Penguins. Now, this one, I was talking about how good offensively the Penguins were, but I think this series against Washington will really show where they lack, and that is defensively. Who do they have? Daly, Mata, and Letang. That's it. Ben Lovejoy is a top 4 defenseman on the Penguins, and I think that that will be their ultimate downfall, because when it comes to two-way forwards, I don't know that much about the two-ways on Pittsburgh, but when it comes to their defensive core, if you have that defensive core, Letang, Mata, Lovejoy, Daly, going up against Ovechkin, Backstrom, Kuznetsov, Oshie, I think that Washington will take this one. Now, as I said, Matt Murray is very good. Maybe even by this time Fleury might come back. I don't know when Fleury's going to come back, but if he does during this series, I think it's lights out for Pittsburgh. 4-2 Washington is what I predict for the second round. Our last matchup is one of the most interesting ones on here, Florida versus Detroit. And if you told me at the beginning of the year, Florida and Detroit have a chance to play in the same playoff round together in the second round, I would be like, what? That's a very weird claim that you have, but nevertheless, it's what I predict will happen here, Florida versus Detroit, and I think that when it comes to this specific series, Detroit's age will start to show a little bit. Datsuk has said that he's going to leave to Russia for a bit of family stuff. Some people are speculating that he's going to stay in Russia and not come back. Zetterberg is getting up there as well. The Detroit Red Wings are a pretty old team, and the Panthers, other than Luongo, Willie Mitchell, and Yager, they do have a pretty stacked young lineup, as I said earlier in the video. So I think that the Panthers will take this series ultimately 4-3. You know, I don't really know what to expect in a Florida and Detroit series, but I would expect some fast-paced action because those young guns can really get their legs moving, and if you have Ekblad on the point, he's very, very good. Definitely an elite guy right now, so I think that Florida will take this one 4-3 over the Detroit Red Wings. Here we are now in the conference finals. We have ourselves in the West, the Dallas Stars versus the Anaheim Ducks. Now, when I look at this series, the Stars versus the Ducks, this is the big one that a lot of people were expecting coming into this season. Anaheim has really been turning it on recently. I feel that they are as good, if not better, than they were in last year's playoffs, and Dallas has really come into their own with Jamie Benn, Seguin, Sharp, Spezza, etc., all stepping things up over there. So when I put these two teams together, I say to myself, this is going to 7 games. This is definitely going to 7 games. And when I look at all the hype around these two teams, the Stars and the Ducks, I do think the Stars do have what it takes to advance to the Stanley Cup Finals, and I know that a lot of people do too, but for some reason, there's just something in me that says the Dallas Stars won't beat the Anaheim Ducks in a 7-game series. So that's why I'm going to say here that Anaheim will defeat the Dallas Stars in 7 games and advance to the Stanley Cup Finals and advance to the event that they weren't able to get to because of the Chicago Blackhawks last year. Remember what was said last year? The Ducks were an even bigger challenge than the Lightning? To me, it's going to be Anaheim over Dallas in 7. On to our other matchup in the Eastern Conference Finals, the Florida Panthers versus the Washington Capitals, the Metropolitan leader versus the Atlantic leader. Now, when you look at this series, when you look at the Eastern Conference, when I look at the Eastern Conference, I say to myself, the best teams, the biggest teams to go up against right now are Pittsburgh and Washington, and they are both in the Metropolitan Division. But when I look at the Atlantic, Florida has been doing really good for themselves this year. The Tampa Bay Lightning, they lost Stamkos, no. Detroit's going to lose Datsuk, and I don't know. And the Islanders, well, Tavares isn't as good as he was. Florida is the only good team out of the Atlantic, in my opinion. So when it comes to Florida versus Washington, you can really think to yourself, oh yeah, this is going to be a good action-packed series. But honestly, when it comes to just that desire to want to win, I think that Washington is definitely going to take this one. I think that Washington has proved that they are a big steam house when it comes to playing hockey, and if you put them up against the Florida Panthers in the Eastern Conference Final, I think they're really going to start turning things on, which is why I'm going to say the Washington Capitals will defeat the Florida Panthers in 5 games. Now, I know 5 might be a little bit too harsh on the Panthers, but really, it's just a gut feeling, 5 games, I think, is what it's going to take for Washington to eliminate Florida. So here we are in the Stanley Cup Finals, the Anaheim Ducks versus the Washington Capitals, a matchup that people have been expecting for the entirety of this year. Well, except the beginning, because Anaheim had a bad start, but regardless, these are the 2 teams in this year's playoffs that I feel have the absolute necessary skill to advance to the finals out of any of the teams that are in the playoffs this year. And when it comes to Anaheim versus Washington, you're going to see the firepower. You're going to see the big defensive battles. You're going to see the battle of the goaltenders. John Gibson is amazing. And Braden Holtby has tied Brodeur for the record with a very reduced amount of games played. This series right here, Anaheim versus Washington, is a very big one, and I think it will go to 7 games. But that game 7 will be a big one. It'll be a very highly broadcasted game 7, and when it comes down to the nitty-gritty, I think that what's going to get Anaheim to the Stanley Cup this year is that experience that they've had in the past. They've won the Cup before, they've made it to the conference finals last year. Ovechkin, as much as I want him to win a cup, I don't think it's coming this year. I know the hype is all around President's Trophy winning Washington Capitals winning the cup, but President's Trophy teams don't really have the most success, especially recently. You look at the previous 5 President's Trophy winners. One of them made it to the Stanley Cup Finals and lost. One of them won the Stanley Cup. One of them lost in the quarterfinals, one of them lost in the conference finals, and one of them lost in the semifinals. I know that Washington has improved as a team, but I don't think it's their time just yet. Ovi, I really want you to win a cup, but your time is not now. I don't think your team has the experience, and I think Anaheim will take this one in 7 games. So there you have it, I really don't know if I want to upload this video or not, because if I get any of my predictions wrong, the dislikes will just keep on coming, and hey, even if the playoffs started next year, I'd still get dislikes because I eliminated some of your guys' favorite teams, but this is what I think will happen in the playoffs this year. It'll be an Anaheim versus Washington finals matchup with Anaheim winning in 7, so I'm going to be paying attention to the TV this year, I'm going to be watching most of the games, seeing if I'm right, because, I like to be right. Who doesn't like to be right? If you guys disagree, which of course a lot of you guys will, feel free to post what you think in the comments below. I'd like to read your hockey comments, because when it comes to hockey, I can talk about hockey for days on end. So, that's my predictions for this year's playoffs. Hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you're passing, if you're down, if you're like and not subscribe, Larson and Gaming, and bye.